I'm Newburgh Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Kim LeBlanc Esparza. Thank you for taking the time to learn about how school district budgets are built, where we sit currently, and what we're facing going into next year. School district budgets are a delicate balance of three main areas: revenue, or how we get money; expenditures, or how we spend money; and the ending fund balance, which is the margin for error we need to maintain our financial health. To give you an idea of how a budget is built, let's start with a look at the 2016-17 budget. We received $69.6 million in resources last year. Almost 70% of that money went into the general fund. The other 30% has to be spent in very specific ways. They include student body funds, food service funds, debt service, including PERS costs, the 2011 bond repayment, and federal and state grants. So that 70% of our total budget is the general fund. That equaled $48.6 million last year. The general fund is the pot of money the district has the most control over. The general fund covers day-to-day operations and is the area where we focus budget planning. Revenue, or the money coming in, comes from the state school fund, local property taxes, and the common school fund, all of which are part of the state school fund equalization formula, which is driven by enrollment. What's the equalization formula? It's the state's way of ensuring that districts that receive less local revenue, like property taxes or timber funds, get more state funds. This ensures that all districts are able to fund schools evenly, no matter how wealthy the community. In addition, state revenue gives additional weighted funding for specific student groups, like those students living in poverty, or students with disabilities, or English language learners. As you can imagine, it's challenging to build a budget the spring before a school year starts. We don't know exactly how many students we'll have, how much money we'll get from local revenue or the state school fund, and how much of that weighted money we'll receive for students in those specific groups. That's why we're always looking at 3 years. The current year revenue is based on projections of enrollment, demographics, and local revenue. Then, the state compares those projections to actual enrollment, demographics, and local revenue the following year. That means if our best estimate is over or under what the state determines the actual numbers are, the state adjusts last year's funding in the current year. Each of the last 2 years, the state has asked for around $500,000 back. We are planning for another adjustment this May due to an overage in state school fund dollars because our estimate of local revenue was off. Now, back to our general fund dollars. Last year, we spent $49.4 million. In initial forecasting, that was our expected revenue as well. Our revenue ended up being $48.6 million due to a number of factors we'll get to a bit later in this presentation. 85% of our general fund goes to staff salaries and benefits. Once you add in fixed costs like utilities and transportation, we have just 7% of our budget to spend on other costs like building operations, supplies, and even substitutes. The ending fund balance is the difference between what money we brought in and what we spent. School districts cannot have a negative ending fund balance. An ending fund balance is important because it provides support for unexpected emergencies. For example, a roof collapse or a need to add staff at the last minute. This can help meet short-term cash flow needs, can ensure financial stability for a district, which is important for the district's credit rating. The standard recommendation for a bond rating is a minimum of 5%. Our board of directors have recently developed an ending fund balance policy to make this a priority in future budgets. We ended last year with a lower ending fund balance than we planned for because we had less revenue and the state adjusted for the prior year. In the last 10 years, the highest ending fund balance we had was 5.8%. Most of the declines in the ending fund balance over the decade have aligned with lower than anticipated enrollment and/or state school fund adjustments. We want to start working toward a consistent, stable ending fund balance so we can absorb a portion of unanticipated costs, like the enrollment decline we saw this fall. So where are we now? We started this school year with challenges due to the low ending fund balance of last year. That balance was lower than planned because the state school fund adjustment, over-projecting local revenue, and lack of state funding for the state-mandated Sitka program, which is a program that serves students living in Chehalem Youth and Family Services group homes. So we didn't get reimbursed for some of the program costs that we anticipated we would. That means we started the 2017-18 school year with less money than we anticipated or built our budget on. We made adjustments to this year's budget to offset these changes by cutting some district-level expenses and by not replacing some staff. In September, we saw a significant unanticipated drop in enrollment. Without a strong ending fund balance, we couldn't support the changes in revenue or spending since the money the state gives us directly is tied to our enrollment. So we had to make some reductions in the fall. We worked to keep them away from classrooms. 25% of the cuts were in non-staff areas like district-level initiatives, including professional development. 75% were staff cuts, but only 15% directly affected classrooms. The district did make cuts to instructional facilitators and administrative positions. Since September, we've seen an increase in labor costs and a reduction in local property taxes to date. If we didn't make any changes and all our schools and departments spent their full budgets, as of December 1, our ending fund balance for this year was projected at $184,000. That's why we started the budget process early. This semester, we're freezing open positions when possible and limiting all discretionary spending. The board's development of an ending fund balance policy helps us in the years to come. The goal is to set aside 2.5% next year as a first step toward an eventual 7% ending fund balance. The following is a preview into the 18-19 budget. As we talked about earlier, we have to make projections. It's our best guess. If we take our current spending levels and adjust for increases in costs like salaries, benefits, utilities, and transportation, we will have $3 million more in expenses than what we anticipate in revenue. This means that we expect to have a $3 million shortfall. That includes anticipated revenue from the state school fund and enrollment projections. In addition, we need to set aside that 2.5% for the ending fund balance, which is $1.3 million. This is what our ending fund balance would look like if we made no changes in budgeting for the 2018-19 school year and beyond. This is why setting aside money for the ending fund balance is so important. This is what our ending fund balance looks like with the reductions we're proposing for next school year. But again, these are just projections based on rolling forward our estimates in our expenditures. We have not yet built the budget for 2018-19. This is just the amount we need to plan for in order to start building financial stability. So here's what's next. We know we cannot make up this shortfall without cost savings. Some of those will likely have to come from our biggest expense, which are salaries and benefits. The district administrative team has already committed to reductions within this team in excess of $500,000. We plan to engage staff, administrators, our unions, our families, and community in problem solving to find those savings. There are 2 upcoming community budget forums scheduled for March 14th and 15th. Looking beyond next year, we'll also have an increase in PERS costs beginning with the 2019-20 school year of $2.1 million. Any changes in demographics will also affect funding. And the state school fund amount is up in the air, as 2019-21 is a new biennium. We also have to negotiate salaries again with our unions. Here's a look at some important dates coming up in the budget process. After we get input on spending priorities from our staff and families throughout the months of February and March, we'll start building the budget. In May, we'll propose the budget to the Budget Committee. The committee makes a final budget recommendation to the board, which is scheduled to adopt the budget June 12th. The budget must be adopted by June 30th per state statute. Please join us for a community forum on March 14th at the district office or March 15th at Newburgh High School from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. We'll get your feedback about what your priorities are for spending in next year's budget. If you cannot attend a meeting, you can submit your feedback through the link bit.do/community input. Thank you for taking the time to learn about our budgeting process and to learn how you can be a part of the process. We have some challenges ahead, but as long as we continue to prioritize students, we'll be able to plan for their future and the financial stability of our district moving forward.